Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Scott Wingerter Show. Today is Monday, April 1st. And if you think that this is an April Fool's joke, you're wrong, because it's not. I didn't have the opportunity to be here yesterday to record this the day that I wanted to, because, of course, it was Easter Sunday. And like the other 2.2 billion Christians on Earth, I was celebrating Easter with my family. So I couldn't get in here. That being said, I hope that everyone yesterday had a wonderful Transgender Visibility Day. That's right. You see, I know there are 365 days in a year, but our president, who claims that he's a Catholic, decided that yesterday, on the highest holy day in Christendom, that we were going to name Easter Sunday of 2024 as Transgender Visibility Day. Now, what exactly that means, I have no idea, but it smacks of, well, critical theory and Marxists. So let's go ahead and get our tinfoil hats ready, because we're in for a wild ride today as we go down the rabbit hole that is critical theory. Okay, so one of the things that you have to understand about critical theory is that it is Marxist in nature. And I'm not just saying that. The people that came up with these theories, the political philosophers, all came from the Frankfurt School in Germany, which was self-proclaimed as Marxist in nature by the people that came out of it. So they all identify as communists, as Marxists, and have come up with a theory to help the communist revolution worldwide get kicked off, right? So I know I put the tinfoil hat on a moment ago, but that was really just in jest. These theories are communist, and when you get down to what it is that they're trying to achieve, then we'll understand why Mashed Potato Brains yesterday decided that he was going to make Easter Transgender Visibility Day. It all fits together, all right? I'm not crazy. Just stick with me. All right, so the first question is, what is critical theory? So critical theory draws heavily on Karl Marx's notion of ideology, all right? And when Marx is talking about this ideology, because he's a very poor philosopher, he doesn't really do a good job at explaining what these terms mean, okay? For example, Marxism is all about class structure and the proletariat fighting against the bourgeoisie and these two classes at war with each other. But Marx never gives an actual definition of a class is blah. He just doesn't identify it. That way, I think it can be whatever he wants it to be. And I get the idea that this ideology, while it has its roots in sort of this Platonic idea of like perfect forms and everything like that, it's way more loosey-goosey than you'd see in other branches of philosophy. So it's kind of hard to pin down what he means by that. But the idea is pretty simple. The bourgeois class, right, they are the ones that control the means of production. And so consequently, they also control culture and everything else in a society. The laws, beliefs, morality of the society then are reflecting the interests of the bourgeoisie and never the interests of the proletariat. So we're making a grand assumption right there that, because I'm in the bourgeoisie class, that my interests are always going to be in conflict with, the poor farmer down the road's interests. We can't have aligned interests because we're of different classes. I know that doesn't make any sense. That's a huge problem with Marxism is it doesn't make any sense, right? What you're coming into when you get this critical theory coming out of the 1920s and 30s and 40s into the 1950s and 60s is the people that are pushing this critical theory, right? They've realized a huge secret that no one else has seen before, right? Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. By 1948, 100 years had gone by since he published the Communist Manifesto. And if you were to look around in 1948, just after World War II, you had all the liberal Western capitalist societies, the democracies, right, that stood up against fascism and are now sort of facing off against the communist threat from the Soviet Union, right? And the Cold War's happening. What has happened is Marx had predicted that with the coming industrial revolution, that what was going to happen was that the middle class was going to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. That the bourgeois class was actually going to shrink and shrink and shrink. That basically the people that were a part of the bourgeoisie, the rich, they were going to get kicked out of the bourgeoisie and put down a peg into the middle class, as only a handful of really wealthy elite bourgeoisie people were going to buy up all the stuff, right? And they were going to control the means of production, only like 5 or 6 of them, right? And that everyone else would be kicked out of the bourgeoisie class and into the middle class. And then over time, because so many, only the handful of people that controlled the means of production, that they were going to be in charge of all of the decisions, and that they were only going to make decisions that interested them, that elite bourgeoisie class, that over time, even the middle class would shrink out of existence. And so you're going to have 5 or 6 people in the bourgeoisie and then everyone else in the proletariat. And then the nation would be ripe for a communist revolution. Well, 100 years had gone by and everybody noticed that that didn't happen. That actually the exact opposite of that had happened, right? So the middle class in America, for example, was doing great. People, it was growing. You had all of these GIs returning from the war. Congress had passed the GI Bill, so all these guys that had served in World War II come back, they can go to college, they can get really good jobs. That's when you see television coming out. That's when you see sort of marketing on a grand scale hit America harder than it had in any time before that. That's where you get, new cars are being made, subdivisions are being built. You have the suburbs are this burgeoning place for the middle class to reside in. And, the American life that, we all know, that I grew up with as a kid, that was really the birth of it, was right after World War II. So Marx could not have been more wrong. And so the founders of this critical theory developed this notion that by basically identifying what society's beliefs and values were and how that didn't necessarily go right along with what they wanted, that they were going to have to attack, to basically change their tactics, right? They were going to have to, they couldn't rely on economic depression to push the communist revolution forward the way it kind of did in the Soviet Union in 1917. That wasn't going to happen in in England or in America or Canada or Australia, right? This wasn't going to happen. So they needed to figure out a way to convince people that what they really needed to do was to have a communist revolution, because the poor fools didn't recognize it themselves, okay? The way that they go about doing this is they start chopping people up into different tiny little sectionalities, okay? That's why all of these critical theories, like there's critical race theory, there's critical gender theory, there's all of these critical theories that are all based upon the differences that people have in their lives, right? There's one philosopher in particular named Herbert Marcuse who is basically credited with coming up with a lot of these ideas, okay? the racial movement, the critical theory-based movements about gender. And he brought that stuff from the Frankfurt School and into the American Academy. So he was a German-born Hegelian Marxist. All right. So Hegel and Marx, they unite a lot. You're going to see that a lot. Nietzsche as well. They believe very strongly that history is done in cycles, and that, that's what the driving force for economics and history are based on, these cycles. So you had, way back before civilization really got started, we were a trade and barter societies, right? And then we developed civilizations, and then we had currency, and then, you had that whole medieval feudalism era, and then we went into industrialization. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get back to that trade and barter system. That's what communism is really all about, right? Oh, you need a basket? Well, here, I make baskets. You can have a basket, and then you give me a couple of fish so that I can eat that night. That's, pure communism. And isn't it lovely? No. So that's Hegel. That's Marx's idea on that stuff. So in his 1965 paper, which was called Repressive Tolerance, he says this. Marcuse writes, "This essay examines the idea of tolerance in our advanced industrial society. The conclusion reached is that the realization of the objective of tolerance would call for intolerance towards prevailing policies, attitudes, opinions, and the extension of tolerance to policies, attitudes, and opinions which are outlawed or suppressed. In other words, today, tolerance appears again as what it was in its origins at the beginning of the modern period, a partisan goal, a subversive, liberating notion and practice. Conversely, what is proclaimed and practiced as tolerance today is in many of its most effective manifestations serving the cause of oppression." Let's break that down for a second here, because this is what these people always do. These leftists always do. Just like Marx, they aren't really good at defining concretely the terms in which they're talking about, okay? So try to follow me here for a second, all right? We in America have a tolerant society in that we have, for example, freedom of speech. People can get out there and they can say whatever they want. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be true, it might be hurtful, whatever. You can say basically whatever you want within reason, right? That's actually intolerance. You see? So the tolerant society is actually intolerant. And so how are we going to fight that? Tolerance becomes, according to Marcuse, this ploy instituted by these powerful, conniving, this cabal of capitalists in the bourgeoisie against the unsuspecting proletariat, which are just too dumb to know what's good for them, right? So the masses are basically duped, and they're being programmed by the bourgeoisie to support their oppressors. So tolerance is used to suppress the ordinary mom and pop, right? Marcuse goes on to say, tolerance is an end of itself. The elimination of violence and the reduction of suppression to the extent required for protecting man and animals from cruelty and aggression are preconditions for the creation of a human society. Such a society does not yet exist. Progress towards it is perhaps more than before arrested by violence and suppression on a global scale. As deterrence against nuclear war, as police action against subversion, as technical aid in the fight against imperialism and communism, as methods of pacification in neo-colonial massacres, violence and suppression are promulgated, practiced, and defended by democratic and authoritarian governments alike. And the people subjected to these governments are educated to sustain such practices as necessary for the preservation of the bourgeoisie status quo. So, therefore, the public in a non-Marxist or non-revolutionary societies like America, like Great Britain, like Canada, they're too senseless. They're too dumb to realize that they are oppressed in the first place, and that their existence basically is at the service of these, capitalists in the bourgeois society. Marcuse goes on to claim that tolerance is extended to policies, conditions, and modes of behavior which should not be tolerated because they are impeding, if not destroying, the chances of creating an existence without fear and misery. Like every communist nation on earth, right? This sort of tolerance strengthens the tyranny of the majority against which authentic liberals protested. The political locus of tolerance has changed. While it is more or less quietly and constitutionally withdrawn from the opposition, it is made compulsory behavior with respect to established policies. Tolerance is turned from an active into a passive state, from practice to non-practice. Laissez-faire the constituted authorities. It is the people who tolerate the government, which in turn tolerates opposition within the framework determined by the constituted authorities. Tolerance towards that which is radically evil now appears as good, because it serves the cohesion of the whole on the road to affluence or more affluence. The toleration of the systematic moralization of children and adults alike by publicity and propaganda, the release of destructiveness and aggressive driving, the recruitment for and training of special forces, the impotent and benevolent tolerance towards outright deception in merchandising, waste, and planned obsolescence are not distortions and aberrations. They are the essence of a system which fosters tolerance as a means of perpetuating the struggle for existence and suppressing the alternatives. The authorities in education, morals, and psychology are vociferous against the increase in juvenile delinquency. They are less vociferous against the proud presentation in word and deed and pictures of ever more powerful missiles, rockets, bombs, and the mature delinquency of a whole civilization. So this is all what Marcuse is saying, right? That our tolerant society is actually intolerant, and that the people are too stupid and they're just being sort of driven like lemmings off of a cliff. And what's really good for them, if they knew what was really good for them, they would become communists, obviously, so that we could have utopia, because we don't understand, human nature at all as a Marxist. We think that mankind can be perfected if we could just progress a little bit further, then we'll reach utopia. It'll be great, right? They don't understand. These Marxists don't understand that mankind's nature is fixed, that you might be a perfectly fine person watching this right now, but, the fact that you're a human being means that you have some scumbag part of you, because we all do, myself included. All right? When we look at history, we can understand human nature. Humans are selfish. Humans are driven to do what interests themselves. All right? It's not necessarily that human beings are incapable of doing good. It's that when human beings, although we're capable of doing good, odds are we won't. That's what history tells us. Marxists disagree with all of that. Marxists think that if we could just, progress ourselves and evolve ourselves to reaching the perfection of human possibility, then we can have absolute world peace under a communist utopia, and everyone would get along, and I would enjoy your fish and you would enjoy my baskets. Well, now I think I can buy that, right? So, in other words, America is this land of opportunity, and it's this land of freedom. And Marcuse is saying that's all kabuki theater. That's all fiction. That is all, the masses having delusional glasses on or something. We are mindless zombies, according to Marcuse, incapable of thinking for ourselves. And only an expert like, Marcuse could possibly understand how society is actually, supposed to be constructed. And he's the one who can see the truth. So how is he going to get past this? How are we going to shake these liberal democracies and these capitalists out of their coma so that they can finally awaken and be enlightened and realize that they actually wanted to be communists all along? Well, in order to do that, you see, we're going to have to do the opposite. Remember, for a lot of these Marxists, it's opposite day every day. Or is it not opposite day? I've never been able to figure that one out. Neither have they. What they want to do is they want to say, okay, so society is going to say that it is a tolerant society, even though it's actually intolerant. And so for us, the tolerant people, to institute an actual tolerant society, we're going to have to be intolerant to the actual intolerant society. You following along? Yeah, I'm not really either, but that's what these people are thinking. Okay. So what we need to do is we really need to make people miserable. Okay. If we can make people miserable, right, then they'll be unhappy. And if they're unhappy, then maybe they'll revolt and we can have our communist revolution. Wouldn't that be great? So how are we going to make people unhappy and miserable? Well, if we can section off large portions of society into different little boxes, little compartments, if you will, and then whisper in the ears of the people in each one of these boxes that you're oppressed. Your society doesn't tolerate you. Okay, they're out to get you. Your rights are being taken away. Nobody actually cares about you. If we can do that and whisper that into everyone's ear, then you can make them miserable. And if they're miserable, then they're unhappy. And if they're unhappy, then they're ready for the revolution, baby. Let's go. That's what we see on full display today. Okay. When we see, I grew up in, I was in school in the 1990s. Okay. By the time that I was in high school, we were a colorblind society. Nobody gave a crap about race, okay? People were like, oh, you have your heritage. That's cool. But we were not in a place, it wasn't like the Jim Crow 1950s, okay? We had reached, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech where he says, I look forward to a place where people will be judged on the content of their character instead of the color of their skin. We had that in the 1990s and the early 2000s. It wasn't until, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2014, that all of this started amping up. This racist portion of America, right, started coming out of the woodwork, right? Did it really, or was that just reported as to have happened? Now we do have racial problems in America. That's not in question. But why did we regress? That's what I don't understand. I think it has to do with this. We're going to section off people according to their race, in this case, and whisper to them that their rights are being violated, that they're being trampled underfoot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to get a whole section of people mad. We're doing that now with this whole transgender stuff, right? That's why Biden comes out yesterday. And, like I said at the very beginning of the video here, why is he doing this? Why is he picking Easter Sunday of all day to make, an executive order that says that Easter Sunday is now Transgender Visibility Day, whatever that means? Well, it's designed to make people mad. You know, I know a lot of Christians that were really upset by that yesterday. Because why would you do that on this day? Number one. Number two, I just don't see transgenderism being that big of a deal, guys. I mean, what we're talking about, like less than 1% of the population, in previous years was even affected by this. Now it's up to like 3%. Maybe some reports have said it's up to like 10% of kids now are identified as transgender. What are we talking about here? Why is it such a big deal? Oh, we need Transgender Visibility Day? Well, no, I'm pretty sure we don't. We all know the transgender thing, the whole transgender thing is, kind of a big deal to the people on the left because you don't ever shut up about it. It's rammed down our throats. It's in our faces constantly. I'm over it, and I think most Americans are, but we're playing right into these Marxists' hands, right? They're trying to upset you. They're intentionally trying to upset you. And they're intentionally doing it on the highest holy day in Christendom. Why? Well, because when you're a good Marxist, another thing that has to go along with like the nuclear family and traditional American values and all of that stuff is, of course, religion. You got to get rid of that because the state is God and you will listen to your God or else, right? So when I see how all of this is unfolding, right, knowing the intellectual history here, it's pretty obvious what they're doing because they're not very smart people. I'm sorry to say this, you can't be an intelligent, critical thinking person and also be a Marxist. Because if you can read a book, and I recommend everybody go out there and buy a copy, it's free online. You can find the Communist Manifesto out there online for free, and you can read it if you can read it, because it's really hard to read because it's that poorly written. Marx was an idiot. He had no idea what he was talking about. He was wrong on every single point. Like I said, 100 years goes by and the middle class in 1948 are doing really swell. Wealth had increased. The Industrial Revolution had basically blew up the middle class instead of shrinking it the way that Marx said it would. He couldn't be more wrong about this stuff. Which is why we have to have this critical theory now come in and basically attack all of these traditional institutions, whether it's the church, whether it's the nuclear family, whether it's America itself. Because remember, this is the goal. This is the Marxist goal. We need to topple America because by doing that, then we basically depose the American government, which is actually the biggest threat to the communist movement, right? Because what America offers people is different than what Marxism offers them, right? I'll put it to you very simply. You red pill, blue pill moment, right? Do you want individual liberty? Or do you want central controlled state government powers telling you what you will or will not do? It's that simple. Liberty is a threat to Marxism, and they cannot tolerate it. So it has to be destroyed. And of course, we're going to say, well, America's racist because, it had slavery in the past. Or America's racist because of what we did to the Native Americans. As if we were the first and only people ever to commit sin in the world. It's funny how we get blamed by these Marxists for all of our sins and all of the sins elsewhere in the world are overlooked. It's only America that had slavery. It's only America that moved Indians out of their land and stole their land. That's never happened before in all of human history, except it always happens in human history that people fight over resources like land. For somebody that claims to be, a cyclical Hegel-like historian, Marx sure doesn't know what he's talking about. The other thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to topple this American government by fomenting this displeasure among all of these different people groups, saying, oh, well, this group, your rights are being violated. This group, your rights are being violated, blah, 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 even though they don't even believe in natural rights. Remember, if you're a Marxist, you don't believe in natural rights. That's not a thing that Marxists do. They don't have rights. Like, you think they have rights in North Korea? You think they had rights in the Soviet Union? What are you talking about? Remember, you do what the government tells you to do because government is God. There is no right. There is no wrong. What is right and what is wrong is defined by the government. Because remember, it's replaced God as the ultimate authority. I'm going to say something that is going to sound horrible, but I want to say this, and I want you to stick with me all the way through till the end so that you clearly understand this, because this is the way that you fight against this critical theory movement, okay? Whether it's critical race theory, critical, gender theory, whatever. Any critical theory is Marxist in nature, right? So stick with me here. So, these Marxists will go along with like Black Lives Matter, for example, and they'll whisper in the ears of these people and say, okay, so your rights as black people, as a black community are being violated. Or your rights as the Hispanic community are being violated. Your rights as, the LGBTQ plus community are being violated. Listen to me very carefully. The black community doesn't have any rights. The Hispanic community doesn't have any rights. The LGBTQ plus community doesn't have any rights. Individuals have rights. And that's important to understand, because if the individual is my metric by which I am judging all of this stuff, right? If that's my target, right? And I'm worried about the individual person's rights, that is the broadest brush possible. Because if I care about every individual's rights, then I'm talking about 7.5 billion people that are made in the image of God and have unalienable rights from him because he's the highest authority. No one else can take it away, right? By saying that the black community, the Hispanic community, the LGBTQ+, what you're doing is you're taking a whole bunch of individuals, boxing them into controllable little boxes, and then fomenting anger within those boxes. Why? So that they'll topple the institutions that these communists don't like, that are in the way of their pursuit of utopia. And that is exactly what we see going on here today. So if you disagree with me, please bring it on. I, would love to enter into a debate with people online about this. We can talk about it in the comments. I ask that you we'll be respectful. I'll be respectful to you. Be respectful to me. Let's not sling mud. Okay. 2 things happen when you sling mud. You get your hands dirty and you lose a lot of ground. So let's have this debate. I want to have an open dialogue with people, even if you disagree with me. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'm providing you with a whole bunch of primary source data here to demonstrate my point. Don't come to me and just be like, well, I disagree and not have anything. Do some research. Come with your homework done. We can enter into a conversation about this. I'm open to doing that. If you are enjoying this kind of stuff, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the follow button. If on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. If you're catching this in a short, I have a much longer videos that really go into depth here. So, a short's only 60-second clips, real quick. But check out the whole channel. I have a master's degree in history, intellectual history, political history, legal history. That's all in my wheelhouse. I love that stuff. I can talk to you all day long about it. So it's a fascination of mine, and I try to do quality research. So take a look at it, and if you are getting anything out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, and share. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.